We'll start.
Any attendees?
I don't see any attendees.
There we go.
Yep.
Bring them over now. There we go.
All right. I can do roll call.
Let's do that. Let's get
All right.
started.
I'm just going to go by the names as I see them, so it's in no particular order. Miss Langalis,
Tammy, you're muted.
all right.
Here,
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cantor,
Here.
present.
Mr. Mushak. Here. And if I mispronounce anybody's names that I'm not familiar with, I apologize in advance. Mr. Pachis. There we go. One for one. Miss Wells.
Galen, you're muted also.
I thought I clicked it. I'm here.
Okay, Mr. Williams.
Present.
Okay, Mr. Ferguson,
Here.
Mr. Rowena,
Here.
Ms. Byron,
Present.
Mr. Baxendale,
Here.
Mr. Schulman,
Here.
and I hope I got everybody. The names kept switching every time I spoke, so I hope I got everybody. Looks like I did. Okay. Okay, so you don't have a chairman, I guess I'll start talking. So welcome to the newly formed Planning and Zoning Commission. This is many members from the Planning Commission, many members from the Zoning Commission, and 3 new members. So I'm glad everybody is here tonight. So tonight is just an organizational meeting to kind of get you a little bit acquainted with each other, acquainted with the tasks at hand, and kind of map out what we're going to happen or what we'll be doing over the next kind of 12 months. In particular, the next 2 months are generally really busy. And a lot of that work stems from what the Planning Commission does as it related to the capital budget. So it's kind of a extra busy time. And I think there's going to be a pretty significant demand for applications in the coming months. So I think it's going to be a busy time and pretty exciting time. And the meetings kind of are, I think, are pretty interesting most of the time, as you see a lot of different things, get to understand the city and some of the processes that you have to follow, and then we go through on a kind of like a daily basis. Brian, I don't have the agenda up. Do you know what's the actual first order of businesses so we can try to follow along?
That would be us introducing ourselves.
Okay. All right. Can you stop share for a sec? I'll do it this way. I'll do a broader staff introduction so you kind of know who's who. The primary contacts you'll see are Brian and myself. Brian's the principal planner and is kind of the primary contact for the commission in terms of managing applications and process. You'll also see Michelle Andreski, who's here. She would have joined us tonight, but she decided to take vacation, so she's not with us tonight. She is the land use planner and does a lot of things related to coastal applications, subdivision applications, and so forth. So you'll see her quite a bit. I'll introduce the rest of the crew and then just kind of go through their job descriptions quick, just so you get a better sense of what some of the things they do. On the left here is Vincent Infanti. He's our newest member. He's a land use technician, has been with the city. I don't even know if it's been 6 months now, kind of filled a vacant spot. He does a lot of inspections and permitting. Next to him on his left is Joshua Nagarita. He's a zoning technician, and also Jasmine Peel right next to Josh. They both started within about a week of each other. They're both zoning technicians, and they do the bulk of the permitting and bulk of the front counter work, which is, so they're kind of the face of the office when you come in. When you're getting your permit for your pool, your deck, whatever you're going to do, you'll probably be dealing with them most of the time. Behind them is Greg Baselli, who's the transportation planner, who maybe you'll see him on occasion, but once in a while he'll pop up. In the back next to him is Amelia Williams, who is also a land use technician like Vincent. So she does a lot of inspecting, permitting, and she's been here for a few years now. So we're kind of working her into some of the CAM applications as well. So she starts to get her feet wet in that area. Christina Hernandez in the front is the admin for the department who does all of the fun fielding phone calls and keeping our budget straight and those kind of things. In the back, smiling is Tammy Maldonado, who's the zoning enforcement officer. She's in charge of all the permitting, and Josh, Amelia, Jasmine, Vincent kind of report to her for most of their assignments. So she kind of filters all that process out. In the back, someone you'll probably see going forward on occasion is Laura Kenny. She's the senior planner. She kind of does the planning, and I kind of work with her closely, and she gets involved with a lot of the studies and some of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later. And occasionally she helps out with permitting as well. Next to her in the front is Alexis Carachetti, who is the assistant director within the department, but also kind of runs the conservation, and we're kind of morphing and branching out into more resilience and those kind of things. So she's taking a broader role in that. And on the far right is John Hayducky, who is the assistant zoning enforcement officer, mainly does all the unfortunate kind of things related to violations and so forth. And just to give you a little bit broader perspective on how the department's organized, at the top, myself, then Alexis, who does a lot of the administrative things related to the department, as well as the wetlands and environmental things. Then you have Tammy, Brian, again, as I mentioned, is a principal planner, and then Laura, who kind of is in the, this little realm of her own, and then the tree kind of goes down from there. So that's kind of how the department's set up. Like I said, for the most part, you'll see Brian and myself and Michelle, and then once in a while, we'll bring somebody else in to help out with different applications, depending on complexity, and trying to get them to learn things as they kind of develop in their careers. So that's kind of the department as a whole. If you don't have any questions, we can move on to the next item. All good? And feel free to reach out at any time down the road if you have follow-up questions. I think the next is, if I recall correctly, was everybody here saying hello to each other and maybe just introducing yourselves. Obviously, some people have backgrounds with the commissions, either planning or zoning, and then we have some new faces, so it would probably be good to everybody to get a sense of why you're here, what interests you about serving, and things you're looking forward to or questions you have. Anybody want to start?
I'll
Why don't
start. Good evening, everyone. My name is Steve Ferguson. It's nice to have everyone together and combined. I've been a planning commissioner for 14 years, lived in Norwalk for 20 years, and I love volunteering. It's good to see how the city is going, how it's growing, how we're sustaining ourselves, and the collaborations are always interesting and fun, to say the least. And I'm looking forward to learning more about zoning and how I can help. And my background is in banking. I'm a commercial lender for the past 20 years for a local bank.
Good evening, everybody. I'll introduce myself next. Brian Baxendale. I've lived in East Norwalk for about 14 years, and since I retired, I've tended to work with non-profits, Junior Achievement, Habitat for Humanity, Homes for Hope, and currently working, as I have for the last 12 years, I should say volunteering, not working, sorry, for SCORE, which is a federal resource of the Small Business Administration, helps people set up businesses. Growth is very important to our city and to people. I historically look forward to my time with the Commission to being involved in the POCD and also with the East Norwalk Todd and Village development, which I find developing communities, especially in this exciting time when the city is growing, is very important. So I enjoy looking forward to my time on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you.
I'll go next. My name's Richard Rowena. I've been on the Zoning Commission for, I believe, 4 years. I've lived in Norwalk for about 49 years or 50 years and have been practicing law about that length of time. My practice is virtually all real estate. And now that I'm on the Zoning Commission, I don't appear before it anymore. So that's me.
I'll go.
I'll go next.
Oh,
Go ahead, Mike.
Tammy. Oh, go ahead, Tammy.
All right, Mike, thank you. You're always a gentleman. Hi, everybody. Tammy Langalis. I was also on the Planning Commission for about the last 4 years, and I've lived in Norwalk for years. I was involved a little bit a while back on the Board of Assessor Appeals, and I am one of the commissioners in the 6th Taxing District, and I'm really looking forward to with you and to Brian, acting a lot of work done in the PA and with good living practices in the city.
Tammy, you were cutting out a little bit. Are you finished?
Oh, shoot. Yes, I am.
That's
Sorry.
okay. I think we
Self-service.
just a few words we missed, but I think we understood what you were saying. So I'll go now. Mike
Okay,
Mushak.
thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay. Yeah, Mike Mushak. I've been serving on land use commissions off and on since 2009. I was on the zoning commission for 2 terms, 4 years or 5 years, and then took a couple years off, and then have been serving on the planning commission. So I'm a landscape architect. I'm licensed by the state, and I do residential work here. I have a small business here in South Norwalk. Been here 25 years, and I have a background, though, even though I do residential work, my training was in urban planning at Rutgers. So the field is always keeping me sort of on the cutting edge of things, just because I have to do continuing education. And I'm about to go into a 4-day seminar to get my credits soon. So that is my background. I really love Norwalk with a passion, always have since I moved here. And I am excited about being on this new commission with new faces and familiar faces. And so just Happy New Year, everybody, and looking forward to this.
Louis Schulman. I was chair of the zoning commission. I was chair for between 2 and 3 years, been on the commission about 5 years. Currently retired, but before I retired for 38 years, I was the CEO of the Norwalk Transit District. I was actually one of the people responsible for getting the wheel system up and running in the first place. As during my time there, I oversaw or participated in over 20 planning studies. I have a fairly strong background in planning, and of course my time on the zoning commission. I live in Silvermine. I've lived in town. Richard, I've got you beat by about a year for about 51 years.
I'll go next. Nick Cantor. I've been on zoning about 3 years now. Norwalk around 8. I have 3-year-old and 4-year-old boys that you will see from time to time popping up like little whack-a-mole. So apologize in advance. Looking forward to working with y'all. I think it's a really exciting time for Norwalk and as a community, and looking forward to seeing how we can do really cool things. I think we've done a lot over the past couple of years, and we got a lot of challenges ahead of us, but I think a lot of opportunity to do some really smart, sustainable growth and development in the city. So look forward to working with y'all. Oh, and I have a background, I'm in technology, product manager for asset manager in Westport.
Can I go next?
Oh, sure.
Hi, Happy New Year, everyone. My name is Jacqueline Jordan Byron. Everyone calls me JJ, so I welcome you to do the same. It is an honor to be on this commission. I'm looking forward to rolling up my sleeves and doing the hard work for making Norwalk better for everyone. So my background is in accounting as well as human services. I specialize in conflict resolution. So I'm looking forward to being busy here. In the past, currently now I serve as a vice chair for District B, which is South Norwalk. South Norwalk is booming and growing, lots of changes, as well as for the train station area. So just learning more about what's happening, being involved from the ground up, as well as participating in all the new developments. So I look forward to the growth that Norwalk is going through, and I am proud to be part of it.
Yeah, could go next. My name is Galen Wells. I've been on the zoning commission, I think, for about 5 years. I'm not really entirely sure. I'm currently the secretary, or I was the secretary of the zoning commission before the zoning commission was merged recently. I served on the zoning commission in 2002 for 2 years until I became chairman of the Democratic Party. And it was inappropriate to be on the zoning commission and to have that, kind of political role at the same time. I also think it's really an exciting time in Norwalk. I am very, very excited and happy to see the growth and the change that's going on. I look forward to working with all of you.
All right. Well, I guess I will go next. Hi, everyone. I am Darius Williams, and I'm a lifelong Norwalker. I live on the west end of Norwalk, and I have served on Oak Hills Park Authority. So I have spent some time in the land use arena, and it's always fascinated me because I know how much it affects the quality of life of the Norwalkers and those we serve. And I see many familiar faces here, and I just look forward to the work ahead. Norwalk is a growing city, a developing city, and we just want to make sure that we're moving with the times. And I'm thrilled to be a part of the team and look forward to the work ahead.
Hi, everyone. Hopefully I'm not the last one. My name is Hector Pachas. I'm actually a recent transplant to Norwalk. I was in Stanford for the past 16 years, moved from Peru, and we've been here. We got married, bought a house, and we've been here in Norwalk for the past 4 years, and very excited to be part of the city, and also involved in like the different things. Like I'm a member of the Silver Mine SGC, also a member of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and just being part of the planning and zoning was just natural to try and help with all the growth that is going on. Like really exciting times with the city, and looking forward to working with everyone. And professionally, I come from a background of management, but I'm a photographer. I'm a headshot photographer.
What do we got next, Mr. Baker?
Next, I think we're going over our roles and responsibilities. Let me see what we got. Yeah, kind of applications that'll be likely coming in and what's going on now.
Okay, so I can go through. I did a PowerPoint for this, Brian, if you don't mind. If I can find it. Shoot, all right. Give me 1 minute, I'm sorry.
Hold up, Steve. I think I got it. We lost Steve. Let's give him a minute to get back in.
Can you guys see the screen? Sorry. I got booted out for a
Yep.
second. Okay. Okay. Okay, so I showed you but we started just when I went through kind of the staff folks that you'll see. That's kind of the city's P&Z landing page. So that was just kind of the front section of that. And I can send everybody this presentation if need be, if you think it's helpful. But the second link is kind of like what you'll be working off of a lot, which is the zoning regulations. Those are also on the city page. Also on that page, and I can go through these after if you want to go through them individually. There is a separate page for the commission, which kind of links where your applications are, provides contact information, then links back to the different types of applications and how people go about doing that. Also, what we've been doing, and we were thinking about this pre-pandemic, but the pandemic kind of accelerated, which I think has worked out really well, is all the application materials will be placed up on the city page. So, anytime there's a new site plan or a new correspondence, we'll add those to them and we'll provide the link. So each application has a separate page. And so you can go through all the new materials that have come in relevant to that application, and we'll update you before that. So we typically try to get you meeting memos, usually the Thursday or Friday before your meeting, and your meetings will fall on a Thursday or a Wednesday. So you have hopefully enough time to get through that. Unfortunately, the nature of the beast when it comes to zoning applications is materials come in at the last minute, and we're under statutory timelines to get applications processed. So if we're up against a deadline, sometimes there may not be as much time as we'd like to go through the materials or give you as much leeway as possible. We try to get them up there as quickly as possible. The last link on the bottom here is we shifted all the kind of like city planning efforts off of the city's webpage because the functionality on the city page just didn't do what we wanted it to do or give us the flexibility for things. So we have a separate website where we have all our planning functions, all the planning studies going on, the POCD and everything else is on there. So you can go through and look at all of those. So for the commission itself, as you know, there are 12 of you, 9 seated members and 3 alternates. And Ms. DeMeglio, who was the chair of the Planning Commission, decided very recently that she no longer wanted to serve on the Joint Commission, for time constraints. So there is 1 vacancy for seated members at the moment, but that does provide an opportunity for the alternates, because usually what happens is during the open discussion or the open part of the hearing on an application, everybody gets to participate in the conversation, ask questions of the applicants and so forth. However, when the hearing is closed, only the seated members are allowed to participate in the discussion. So with there being 1 vacancy from the commission at the moment, that will provide the alternates a chance to probably participate on an application at every meeting. If that could switch from application to application, but that will be up to the chairman once that portion of the meeting is decided. To approve any application, you need 5 positive votes, assuming that's, you have your 9 members voting on an application. There are certain instances where you'll need a supermajority or a 2/3 vote to get something passed, but we'll highlight those for you if and when that comes to fruition. Something else to keep in mind, which is very important, if you have a conflict on an application, say, for example, you're related to the applicant, or you own an abutting property, or you have conflict or have worked for that person in the past, better to recuse yourself from that application. So if we're ever meeting in person again, what you really would need to do would be to leave the table or the dais if we're up in the council chambers and go sit in the audience. Or if we're doing it in the Zoom format, better to turn off your video and just not, even be part of the discussion. The idea behind that is if you are, conflicted and you need to recuse yourself, you can unduly influence your colleagues if you participate in the conversation when you're not supposed to participate. But if you ever have a question about whether you should recuse yourself, please feel free to reach out on any of those matters. So the combining of the two commissions, so for each group, there is new things. And for the 3 new alternates, there's lots of new things. And I'm going to go through each one of these in a little bit of detail. We're happy to have conversations with anybody after the fact if you want to go through each one of these types of applications. The Planning Commission had several key functions. Kind of first and foremost, I guess, would be subdivision applications. That's basically when somebody wants to divide their property into one lot into several smaller lots. The city doesn't get too many subdivision applications anymore, maybe 4 or 5 a year, just because Norwalk's fairly built out. The next one's an 824 referral, which is really how city land could be used. And the other function, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, is capital budgets, what the Planning Commission's role and what the new Planning and Zoning Commission combined role is for that. You also have to act on special appropriations, which is basically if someone wishes to expend city capital funds and that wasn't in a prior capital budget, so you have a role to play in that. Mr. Baxendale mentioned earlier the city's plan of conservation and development, which we call the citywide plan. That's a 10-year planning document. The last one was just adopted in 2019 and amended in 2020 and may get amended further over the next 6 months or so. But that's kind of the city's kind of guidebook for how growth and development will occur. So probably in about 4 to 5 years, we'll have to start thinking about the update for that. For the Zoning Commission, some of the primary things they deal with are special permit applications and site plan applications. Those two are very similar, except special permit applications have a higher threshold for approval. They automatically trigger a public hearing and notification to neighbors, and they're a little higher bar to pass. Also, requires public hearing, are amendments to the zoning regulations or the zoning maps. You also see coastal site plan reviews on applications that are in certain distance to the city's coastal resources. And you also have the distinction of being the Aquifer Protection Agency. Luckily, you only meet on that maybe once or twice a year, and those are usually fairly short sessions, but there are a couple different areas in the city which fall under that category. So here, what you see up here is the actual statutory language, which is section 8-25, which deals with the subdivision of land. I am not going to read this all through, but in a nutshell, the typical subdivision application we see now is usually like a 2-lot subdivision or a 3-lot subdivision where they're taking a parcel and dividing it into 2 or 3. So your role in those kind of applications is fairly limited. What you're doing is looking for conformance to the regulations. Is the lot size proposed adequate? Is the width of the lot adequate? Do they have the proper provisions in place for municipal wastewater, for water service? And you do look at things like sidewalks, making sure that those are street trees, are they necessary and should you put those in? So, and sometimes you interact with other city agencies as part of that, which could be the Department of Public Works and or Transportation, Mobility and Parking. So those are kind of some of the side things, but the big things as it relates to your review are the lot sizes big enough, and is it wide enough? Does it meet the basic requirements for approval for a subdivision? The court cases clearly indicate if an application for subdivision meets all of the city standards, you really have to approve the application. You don't really have the leeway to say, I don't like this application. That's not built into the process. Just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind as we go through these. And when you get any of these applications, I've been talking to Brian and Michelle, how we're going to formulate our memos going forward is we'll try to clearly point you to the regulations that are relevant to that application, and the statutory references and sections that come up as part of that. So you can go back and read that for yourself, and we'll try to highlight any pitfalls or any things you really need to be aware of going through those specific applications. Touched on this briefly, but an 824 referral can, there's some simple ways to think about that is if the city is going to build a new sidewalk where there was never a sidewalk before, or a bigger example is if they're going to build a new school or something like that. The agency that's undertaking that project, or another one is if the city's going to sell or buy land. Whatever agency is pursuing that project needs to put together an 824 referral report to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And what you're doing is making a determination of whether this request is consistent with the POCD. And, we'll help you with, relevant language and statutory provisions that go along with that. And so if you make a finding at either yay or nay, then there's a report that goes back to the Common Council, assuming you, say, for example, you say, we don't think this request is consistent with the citywide plan. The Common Council can still overrule your vote, but then it would take, I think it's a 2/3 vote of the council to do so. And please stop me with any questions along the way, because otherwise I'll just keep yammering on. Another thing I touched on briefly are capital expenditures and/or specific requests for capital funds that may not have been within the capital budget. And there's thresholds where those come into play, where you need to look at that request, and similar to the 824, you would need to make a finding that this capital request is consistent with the citywide plan. So that's something that, I don't know, we get maybe, Brian, what do you think? Half a dozen a year request of these. So they're not overly complicated, but usually somebody from finance comes on, or the requesting department, to outline their request and make a determination similar to the 824.
Yeah, he'll see one next week. So.
Oh, okay, there you go. You're gonna get one. Okay, sure, capital budget. So this is something we're going to talk about a little bit later in greater detail. With the combining of the commissions, we saw an opportunity to kind of revise the process, how it was in place. So the Planning Commission had been putting together their own capital budget. And unfortunately, that process didn't have a lot of teeth to it. And oftentimes the capital budget was submitted to the mayor's office, and then things just get changed based on circumstance, but either by the mayor, BET, or Common Council down the road. So what we thought would be more effective and more consistent with the actions of the commission as a whole is when the capital request comes in, there's several meetings coming up on your calendar over the next couple of weeks where you will be meeting with the department heads for all the departments that are requesting capital funds. They will outline their capital request for each project, and then the subcommittee of this commission that will convene, and they will look at the request and make a determination on whether those requests are consistent with the citywide plan. Several years ago, the city modified the process a little bit, which I think is really smart. So within the capital budget requests, which are all done, through some different city software, the departments have to match up their request with a POCD section. So they have to be able to point back to a section to say this is relevant. And the whole concept behind that is ideally, you don't want somebody proposing completely new programs that weren't already outlined in the master plan. Obviously, there are going to be oddball requests or requests that come up that nobody could have contemplated. So there is flexibility built into the process, but the idea is capital spending should follow the citywide plan. So we're hopeful for the most part that process holds true. So for the planning commissioners and some of the new folks, State statute kind of outlines in general what the powers of things you can regulate through zoning. So it talks about you can enact zoning regulations, and within those regulations, you can control how big a building is, where it can be located on a piece of property, where you want the types of housing within your community, how you want to divvy up the kind of zoning layers and zoning districts as they appear within the communities. And you may have seen last fall, there was a lot of conversation about some new legislations and changing to the enabling legislation that came through. And we're going to be going through some of those over the course of the next 6 to 9 months and how they impact our regulations and how they do business. But that's kind of where the the background of your zoning nuts and bolts come from. I went through some of these briefly, but here's a good chart that Brian put together. So you have several actions, like with a text amendment or a map amendment. A public hearing, as I mentioned, is required. It's definitely not an as of right process. And within the POCD, and if you haven't had a chance to look at it or you need the links, please reach out and I will get those to you directly. Within the POCD, there's a future land use map. That is not a zoning map. It's just a map that indicates, if you're going to change your zoning, these are the general categories of land use you should consider, and here's where they should go. So those specific zoning changes should line up pretty well with that. And so if you were familiar with the East Norwalk TOD rezoning that Mr. Baxendale mentioned earlier, that zoning lined up with the POCD changes. So that's kind of the process how it should follow. Again, special permit, public hearing required. It is not as of right. And there are specific standards above and beyond what's listed for a site plan application. And those are outlined in section 1450 of the zoning regulations. And coastal site plans are something that are kind of evolving in front of our eyes. Connecticut Deep is looking at these a little bit differently. And as they're looking at all their CAM issues, and this has kind of happened with some very recent applications that staff has not seen the comments like we got recently. We've had conversations with some of our neighboring municipalities, and they were very surprised by some of the comments that we got as well. So we're going to do our best to navigate through this with you and then see how this all plays out. But there are standards that relate to coastal resources, and those coastal resources are defined in the statute. And so we're needing to find whether the proposal in front of us is consistent with those standards, or can we affect the development to lessen impacts if there are any as proposed. These are the standards for a special permit. I am not going to read these because it's a lot of text there. The big ones that come up a lot, and I think are the most significant, and what you hear about with most applications as it relates to traffic. Traffic is always a big one, but there are triggers for traffic. So what's causing the traffic? Is it the density as proposed? Is it a problem with the street network or the road configuration or access to the site? What are the things that lead to traffic? Are there things that they can do to improve the situation as it relates to traffic? There are other things in there. And some of these criteria are subjective, and subjectivity for your purpose can be good or bad. But you can't base your decision without having fact or reason behind why you make that decision. So when we give you the special permit memos and resolutions to consider, we're going to address these specific criteria on each application and offer our opinion on where we feel it complies or it doesn't comply. And a good land use applicant is going to do that as well and offer their opinion on that. And you as commissioners are then going to have to weigh the information as it's brought to you, and you're going to have to look at staff memo, applicant memo, review the findings and review the materials and make your own determination on whether you feel it complies or doesn't comply. So that's kind of it in a nutshell for those applications. And again, if you want to go through any of these now, I'm happy to discuss them more in detail, but these are the criteria that you'll look at on those applications. And Brian, please chime in if I kind of go off the deep end here with the coastal site plan review or I missed something. So the coastal boundary is probably a little bit difficult to see on the map, but it is that kind of blue kind of squiggly line that goes in and out, follows Norwalk Harbor and Norwalk the river and then up the coast. So within that, these boundaries, there are properties that are subject to coastal site plan review. There are different criteria for the type of application that comes in, whether it could be a single family dwelling or it could be a larger multifamily or commercial dwelling. And the type of property that's impacted also plays a significant role. So even though, like, for example, if you look in East Norwalk, these properties over here, they may not be right on the water. So their impacts on the coastal resources are going to be significantly different if it's a property that's abutting the water. Norwalk does have a lot of properties with hardened interface with the water. So they may have a seawall or something like that. Whereas another property may not have that seawall, and they may be subject to coastal or tidal influence. And so how those get treated could be very different just based on the particular variables associated with that property. So that's a different application. And I said the kind of the way deep is looking at these applications and how we're going to have to treat these in the future is in flux as we speak. So it's going to be a learning process for staff and the commission as we go forward. So what's going on? So I'm actually getting close to the end of my presentation, luckily for you. Some very big things going on at the moment, which you may have read about, may not have read about. We are in kind of almost the middle stages of completely rewriting the zoning regulations. So as soon as some of you start to get comfortable with the materials that are in there, we're going to give you a brand new set of regulations that look nothing like the document that you'll be looking at for the next 6 to 9 months. I will say, as a kind of my editorial comment, the existing regulations are not well structured and not easy to follow. So that we're hopeful that the new regulations are the opposite of that, with a lot more diagrams, pictures, and charts. We're hoping to have a lot less text and a lot more visual examples of what the city should develop as. We have several studies going on. We did there's a draft of the industrial zone study that was completed a few months ago. So right now, the next phase of that is to actually develop regulations consistent with the recommendations within that plan. And then we'll look to also, should we update the plan of conservation and development to have items consistent with that study? Some of you may know there is a moratorium in place on contractor yards and a few other uses in those industrial zones based on impacts and concerns. So we want to try to line up the adoption of changes to those plans with the ending of the moratorium, which I think is in the May timeframe. We probably sent you out a notice about kind of an adjunct to that study, which is a look at the industrial waterfront, which really spans Norwalk Harbor. We intended to do those two things simultaneously, but as we looked at the waterfront more closely with our consultant, we just all came to the same conclusion that there were so many unique things as it relates to the waterfront that we need to give this some special attention. So we are having actually next week on the 18th, and I have the link there for the meeting. Feel free to participate if you'd like. There is a meeting, a public meeting to get feedback on kind of the draft recommendations for the waterfront plan. You do have several members of this commission that have been working on that for the last few months. Something that we haven't talked about that is kind of a little bit behind the scenes because it's kind of a little bit of an unknown quantity. The state had put in some statutory requirements a few years ago, which we didn't pick up on, and just freely admit that every municipality in the state has to have an affordable housing plan in place by July 1 of 2022. So what we've been working with some members of Common Council and the mayor's office is on coming up with maybe a compliant document and then using some of the ARPA funds to do a more comprehensive and a more detailed study. So that's something we'll talk to you a bit more about over the next couple of months. We are exploring, and Laura in our office is taking the lead on this, several avenues to look at coastal resiliency and a coastal resiliency plan. We're working with a couple state agencies on some Norwalk specific projects and hope to get funding to do a broader coastal resiliency plan, which is something that we need to do. And right now is a really good time for funding. There's a lot of different avenues available to us. So I think over the next 6 to 9 months, you'll hear more about the city, moving forward on that front. And 2 other projects, and I think this is it. The redevelopment agency has been leading an effort to do some rezoning and along the west side of the Norwalk train station, because there's some really unique properties there. The taxing district has the mothballed power plant. There's also the train station and also housing authority property. So there's some unique opportunities to do some kind of fun things over there and some really good TOD type work. So that project is ongoing, and I think they're actually meeting right now, which was unfortunate, but the next meeting of that group was occurring here. Laura from our office is sitting in and filling in for myself and the rest of the commissioners. They're also working on, what do we do with the Webster Street lot, which is probably one of the most underutilized and kind of misused properties within the city. So there'll be some work coming out of that over the next 12 months. In conjunction with and in cooperation with the Waterfront study, they're also working on the last phases of how do we complete the Harbor Loop Trail. So they're working on with an engineering firm on how the best ways to connect those missing links on the Harbor Loop Trail, which will be a great thing for the city once it's up and functioning. On the transportation end, the city's in the process of, and I think Brian is participating in this, updating the transportation master plan, and there are several projects that will interface with work of the commission. An outgrowth of the East Norwalk TOD plan was looking at Cove Avenue and Seaview Avenue and what kind of improvements can be made there. So the city's doing some engineering work there on kind of adding bike lanes, landscaping, multi-purpose space, how to improve intersections, make it safer, make a better connection to South Norwalk. So there's a lot going on. My staff, as well as commission, is usually represented on all these things. So there's tie back to the POCD, and we know what's going on. And at the end of the day, a lot of times these are going to require some kind of zoning work. So we want to be able to have input up front so we can kind of tie it into our broader thinking. With that, I'm going to stop share unless somebody's got specific questions on any slides. I'm happy to take any questions you have. I know that was a lot in kind of rapid fire motion.
Steve, I'm going to suggest that you send those slides out to all of us, number one. Number two, it would be helpful, I think, especially to the new members of the commission, if you could put together a kind of dictionary of the acronyms that you use. When you first started, you talked about CAM. Well, I'm sure we have 3 people here who don't know what CAM is. It's coastal area management. But if we could have a dictionary of those acronyms, I think it would be helpful, and we wouldn't have to interrupt every time we speak in order to say, what is that?
Sure, and we can, when we have one of those applications, we can spell that out as part of the, the memo, so it gives a little more clarity.
Thank you.
All right, if no more questions, next on the agenda would be election of officers. We have chair, vice chair, and secretary are the 3 positions.
I'd like to say something about this if I can before we actually get into excuse me, throwing out names. In terms of where I'm coming from, the zoning commission traditionally has met twice a month. Planning commission traditionally, except for the capital budget, meets once a month. We do, because of that, and because of all of the development that's going on in the city, we do an enormous amount of work. And I mean, I can tell you that 5 years ago when I came on the commission, I didn't know a lot about zoning. But over my time on the commission, I certainly have learned about it, and I've learned quite a bit about it. As a result, again, this my feeling, I don't know if others agree or not. But my feeling is that the leadership of the commission for this first year ought to be people with zoning experience. I don't think we can have a chair who will go into a meeting and who is not fully familiar with the rules and regulations. One of the things Steve didn't talk much about is that occasionally, especially on contentious applications, there are sometimes lawsuits. We certainly don't want to see any lawsuits brought because of ignorance on our part in terms of the way we've handled a public hearing. That includes things like not talking back to the public, even when they're being awfully close to being abusive to us. The zoning commission has just been through 15 hours, more than 15 hours of public comment on our two latest projects. I can tell you from our experience, it takes experience to maintain your cool and to handle this professionally. And that's the way we have to handle it. We have to handle it on the basis of the rules and regulations under which we operate. There's really no place, and certainly during the time I've been on the commission, I have not seen this. There really is no place for politics in our decision-making. And there's really very, very little place for decisions that are in any way emotionally drawn. And I think that the zoning commission, including unfortunately the folks who have chosen not to continue, has done a very good job of that. So one person's opinion. I think we ought to leave the leadership in the hands of former. That doesn't mean, by the way, that there aren't other leadership positions to be had. But the three executive committee decisions, for example, if the chair is not available, the vice chair has to be just as knowledgeable about how to run a meeting, how to run a public hearing, and so forth. So again, just one person's opinion.
Are we going forward with nominations?
Steve, does that make sense to you now?
I think that's the next agenda item. So if you can continue that discussion or start the, start the process of electing.
Okay. I don't know who calls on who because we don't have a chairman yet. But I would like to nominate Lou Schulman to continue in the role as chairman. And this, how long is this term, Lou? Is it a year?
It's every election is every year.
every year. So this first year of the Joint Commission, I think that to have Lou continue would be a good way for us to all sort of enter this new Joint Commission with experience and good guidance. And then, of course, there are opportunities next year for anybody to have, be nominated and take any role that they're interested in. So I'd like to nominate Lou Schulman to be the chairman of the Joint Zoning and Planning Commission.
I second that.
I second that.
Could you hear me? Could you hear me? No?
No, I'm sorry,
now,
Steve.
Steve.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah, okay, so with the planning commission, there were items that you have not experienced yet, Lou, that we go through every year. With that being said, there will be a time period where there will be a learning curve for the members of the zoning commission, not just the planning, but the zoning as well. Steve, how are you going to handle those changes, like the capital budget, and the 824s and the subdivisions and things of that nature? Would that be rolled up to the proposed chair? How would those items be handled?
So I'll take the capital budget by itself because that's kind of separate from the other ones. But I think the idea will be that and this is something the planning commissioners are definitely familiar with. The capital budget, I think last year was streamlined a lot in terms of the meetings with the departments was a lot less time than it was in years past, and we split it in 3 nights. So the capital budget, I think the recommendation was to have a subcommittee of this commission for those who are interested in serving on that and participating in that. So there's 3 nights set up already. So it's the 20th, the 25th, and 26th. So what happens is there's an agenda. There's several departments, half a dozen departments or so on each night, and they come in and they present, their request and go through it, walk you through it, those kind of things. So that's something for the zoning commissioners specifically. That's an additional time crunch that you haven't had before. So I just wanted to, not try to sugarcoat it at all. And then for the newer folks, you don't have any background with any of this, so it's all going to be a lot of time. So that's the one thing. So that's a separate piece. I think it's best handled as a subcommittee of people that would, want to volunteer for that, what I would call almost extra duty. So just kind of keep that in mind. For all the applications, whether it's an 824 subdivision or a special permit, we're going to treat them all the same. We're going to have our memos structured so that we're outlining for every commissioner, whether they are brand new or 5 years on the commission, that it's here is the request. Here are the rules that they're playing under. Here's the statutory reference that dictates the process. And here is staff's opinion and recommendations as it relates to each one of these items. So we're going to hopefully make it as painless for you as possible and try to, and part of our role is to make sure that you stay within the confines of the rules. So you can't bring in items that aren't relevant to the application. You can't bring in materials that aren't relevant to the application. You've got to, unfortunately, the land use law and the case law and the rules are, you've got to follow these criteria. And these are the only criteria you can use to make a determination on whether this application should be approved or denied. That's really how it kind of goes. I'm not sure, Steve, if that was what you were kind of asking, but that's how it answered it.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, you was breaking up a little bit. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
I believe Ms. Wells made a proposal. I seconded it.
Okay. So
where do we go, Steve?
Muted, Steve.
Yeah, thanks. So I think we just can call for a vote on that matter, and then the chairman can proceed to, once you elect the chairman, then the chairman can kind of take over the rest of the agenda.
I think, Steve, before you do that, you ought to ask if there are any other nominations.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good idea. Did anybody else want to nominate anyone from the floor or the Zoom? think that's it. Do you want to do
Just
raise
think
the
it's a
hand?
good
vote?
Then discussion, I'll just say I think it's a good idea.
I think we should vote. That's one woman's opinion here.
Did you want to do a simple raise of hands? I think you could probably do that. Okay, I'll just say all in favor of Mr. Schulman as chairman, you can raise your hands. My screen's moving around, which is not helping me. And Ms. Byron, your arm has disappeared and I only see your hand. There you go. Thanks. I think that's unanimous. Your background was the same color as your shirt, so I lost your whole arm. Oh, it's all gone.
In keeping with what I said earlier, I'd like to nominate Mike Mushak as vice chair. Mike has the advantage of coming from the Planning Commission, but also has the background in the not too distant past of having served on the Zoning Commission as well. I mean, we want this to operate as one single organization, not zoning commissioners and planning commissioners. Nonetheless, it seems to me at this initial meeting that it makes good sense to pull Mike in, given his dual background in both planning and zoning.
I second that.
Okay, Hector has seconded.
That was
I
Steve.
accept.
did.
That was Steve, but I
Oh,
second it
I
also.
apologize.
That was Ferguson.
Okay, sorry, Steve.
I should
Okay, second
accept
that
first,
also.
so I do accept.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? All right, if not, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor, raise of hands.
Aye.
Okay, that also looks unanimous. Finally,
Thank you, everyone. And I know there's others that are equally experienced here. So in a year from now, we will review all these, the experience that we have.
right. Finally, as secretary, I'd like to nominate Galen Wells. Not only has Galen proved her value as a member of the zoning commissioner, she also has background as an attorney, which means that in the brief meetings, we have a meeting prior to each commission meeting to go over the agenda to make sure we understand the materials before us. And Galen has been doing that now, I believe, for the last 2 years. I trust her judgment and I value her input. So again, for this year, I would like to continue to work with her in that. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
I'd like to second. Oh,
Okay, so we've got Nick, we've got Hector, and we've got Darius, all seconding.
Just
Any
pick
other nominations? All right. Again, with a raise of hands, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that rounds out the executive committee. Next is an appointment of the chair and members of the capital budget committee. I'll let you know that in order to familiarize myself, I'm going to sit on this committee. I think we probably need something like five members, which will put together a report and then come back to the full commission. And not knowing if I was going to be elected or not, I did not have a prior conversation with anyone regarding this, but Steve, would you be willing to chair that committee? I'm sorry, Steve Ferguson, would you be willing to chair that committee? Oh, I think Steve has disappeared.
No,
I think
Steve,
he's, oh, he's out. He,
Oh.
there he is.
Okay. Did you hear what I said, Steve?
No, I didn't hear anything. I'm sorry. Something's wrong with the connection. All I heard was your mouth was open, and that's all I saw.
Okay, I was asking you, I was apologizing for not having had a prior conversation with you because
Okay.
I didn't know if I was going to be elected chair. But would
Okay.
you be willing to serve as chair of the Capital Budget Committee?
Oh, wow. Yeah, sure. I mean,
I would
I've been
second that.
doing it for 14 years. Why not? You know,
Good.
long nights.
Okay. We need at least three other people who are interested in participating on the committee.
So should I select them now? Should I make a recommendation, or if anyone wants to step up?
When it comes to subcommittees, I typically appoint the members. I'd be happy if you have recommendations on who that might be. I would like to see at least one representative from among the new members of the commission.
I see. Okay, well, at least 3 in addition to myself, right? In addition to myself. So I would
Yeah,
say,
you don't have to,
I'm
but
also
you
going
can.
to serve on the committee so that I can familiarize myself with the capital
Okay.
budget process.
well, I would say Brian Baxendale. I would take any recommendation from you guys on the zoning side. This is a process where over the years we have streamlined it, where the department heads give us their priorities in 5 years and 1 year increments, and they prioritize their projects. There's a lump sum of money that we kind of divvy up between the departments, and then we get the recommendation from the finance director, and then we pass it over. Then I believe the mayor makes the common council makes their recommendation, and then the mayor makes his final, I believe. It consists of I would say 3 nights between 6 and 11:30, 12 a.m. You know, I don't know if we could just have those who are not appointed to the committee still come. I don't know if that can still be open, Steve Kleppen, if they could still join in to get a feel for how things are going. But
Yeah, I don't think I don't think we'll go to that late. Because last year I think we actually, when we streamlined a little bit, because we used to do 2 nights, so it was 2 nights and it was 2 long nights. So last year we did 3, and I think we were done by around 9 on those nights, if I recall correctly.
All right. Well, let me start by asking Brian, are you willing to serve on the committee?
Very happy to serve under Steve. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
So that's 3. We need 2 more members who are interested and
What
willing.
nights do you usually meet?
So the nights right now are the 20th, which I believe is next Thursday would be the first one. The 25th, which is the following Tuesday, and then the 26th. And we might need to schedule a last one where you kind of put together your final recommendations to report back to the full commission.
Can I ask?
Of this month?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, under this one, go ahead, Galen.
I'm sorry, but my question is, if we're not on that subcommittee, but we're interested in how the mechanism works, in learning about it, we could go as just observers, right? Without.
Yeah, so it's going to be a Zoom meeting just like this. So it'll be, you can either watch it as an attendee or watch it later on YouTube. So.
Okay, we'll get a Zoom invitation then.
You could plan your whole weekend around this, yeah. You could.
Galen, my concern is if there are too many people actively participating, we're going to make these meetings longer than they need to be.
Oh, no. I just want to observe. And my husband is the head of a department, so he has to, I guess, present his capital budget. I don't even know really if he has one, but.
Which department is he in?
He's the Register of Voters.
Oh, okay. No.
Theirs would be, it would be like a computers,
No, we wouldn't see it. That'd be under IT, but go ahead. Yeah. That makes
Okay,
sense.
whatever.
That makes sense. Okay.
Lou,
Yeah,
may
so-
I? Sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
I want to just say that last year, Steve, remember, it was a lot shorter. It was amazing because we had those meetings until midnight, 1 a.m. 1 year or 2 years ago. We were escorted out into the dark parking lot because we couldn't even see because the lights went out in the parking lot. And but last year, because it was also the first year we did it by Zoom, people were a lot, it just seemed like it was more streamlined, as was already mentioned. And I think we did finish by 9. So it was 2 hours or 2.5 hours a night. I loved the process. I really did. Because anybody who hears the department heads come in and explain what they're spending money on, it's fascinating. It really is. You learn about the guts of how the city works. So I highly recommend listening in. And I may do that. I would prefer not to serve this year because I'd like to have JJ serve on this committee because I think she would learn a lot and love it. And I think anybody else who is interested. But for sure.
So let's ask, Mike.
Yeah,
Who
let's
would
just
like
ask
to-
people because
who would like to be
I'm fine to just listen in.
JJ, is that a yes on your part? All right. That gives us 4. Is there anyone else that is interested in participating? I
You
mean,
can do it with 4 too. I don't think there's a set number, so however you wanted to handle it.
well, why don't we'll leave it at 4, and if someone else wants to serve, please let Steve know.
Please let me know. I'll share my email with everyone if you guys can't make a decision tonight.
Good. Okay. I'm not sure how many people are even aware of this, but both the Planning Commission and the Zoning Commission actually have a set of bylaws under which we operate. They're fairly simple and straightforward, but they should be rewritten. And I'd like to appoint, if they're willing to serve, Richard, Rowena, and Galen Wells. The reason being that they are both attorneys, and I think they can rewrite these regulations fairly quickly. And I actually think Steve Kleppen could chair this committee and point out the things that it's important for us to include. Richard, is that okay with you? I don't see this as more than 1 or 2 fairly brief meetings because I think you can lean a lot on Steve for the backbreaking work that's involved.
Can I think about it?
Absolutely. Sure.
I really had thought for the first year of this new commission that I really didn't want to be on any extra committees. It was really hard for me to keep up with the industrial ones last year. And, now that it has expanded into the waterfront and I represent 2 or 3 of the marinas on the street, I don't know what I'm going to do with that. So I would just like to have an opportunity to think about it. Maybe if you have access to the bylaws, you can send them to me so I would see how much reading is involved.
Okay. Galen?
I'd be happy to work on it.
Okay, Steve, would you see that both Galen and Richard get copies of both sets of bylaws?
Yeah, and then they're not too, there's not a heavy lift in the reading of those. They're both, and they're both pretty similar. When we restructured them, they're similar. And I know one thing, Brian was talking with Mike Rinn, who used to work with the city, and Wilton was doing their bylaws over. And I know they were talking about electronic meetings and different things along those lines. So that's something we'd probably wrap into this. So if any, when we get the draft at some point, we'll get everybody's input on that to see if they're things that they're comfortable with or not comfortable with.
Okay, Richard, when you decide, just shoot me a quick email. Thank
I
you.
will.
And I'll keep your wishes in mind as we move forward. I wouldn't want to lose your most important input, which is decision-making on the items that actually come before the commission.
Thank you.
Okay. You've already gone through, I have an older copy that shows the application types. Any more comments from you, Steve or Brian?
Yeah, I've just one very important item that I should have put in the presentation. It is something called ex parte communication. And it really relates to applications you get in, like site plans, and it really comes up with things like special permits. You may have been following in the news the 283 Richards Avenue, the Sikh temple that was recently approved by the zoning commission. So that one obviously had a lot of public interest. So as commissioners, when you're out and about, out having dinner at the grocery store, once an application is received by the city, you cannot comment on it outside of the public meeting. You, if somebody comes up and says, hey, what do you think about this? Or, hey, why did you vote on this? Or what are you going to do? You can't talk to them at all. You have to refrain from public comment and then just smile and say, sorry, I can't talk about it. Sometimes, I've been doing this for a long time. Sometimes people have been put in uncomfortable situations with friends or out at social gatherings where somebody wants to talk about the hot topic of the day. But if you do that, you kind of jeopardize the city's position on an application. And, you know, to be honest, if I found out, I'd probably ask you to step aside on that application and not involve yourself. So we avoid any kind of impropriety or look of impropriety. So just keep that in mind. It's a tough thing to do. You get put under pressure. I know people have kind of felt very uncomfortable at times about that, but just keep in mind, once we get in an application, you can't talk about it until we're in this forum.
The other thing is, if no group of 5 of us can get together, or it becomes a meeting, and all meetings have to be noticed, and all meetings have to be open to the public. I mean, the basic rule is no member of the commission going into an application should know more than any other member of the commission, so that we're all starting from the same level playing field on this.
Goes around and then roll. No, underneath.
I'm still on the mute button, sorry.
May I offer a little brief story?
Sure, go ahead, Mike.
That I learned the hard way with ex parte, and my friend and former representative Larry Cafaro, who is also a land use lawyer, got wind of a conversation I had during the Lowe's application, which was in my neighborhood. And there was no need for me to recuse myself, but I was speaking with neighbors about crosswalks on Stewart Avenue. And I thought it would be a good idea if Lowe's put one in. So I mentioned that in a meeting, and it didn't take long for the letter to come in. And before the final hearing, I was asked, because of the ex parte, to recuse myself, which I did. And the application still passed. we never did get a crosswalk on Stewart Avenue, but I really do like the Lowe's. So, but in any case, I just thought I'd offer that up. It wasn't apparent and an obvious ex parte communication, because I had talked to a neighborhood association about it. I would ask for a crosswalk in the hearing, and that was inappropriate. So I learned that, but we move on and we do learn our lessons.
Thank you, Mike. Comments from any of the commissioners? All right, if not, we'll go to what by the end of the meeting is typically everyone's favorite part. That is a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I got one more thing. I apologize.
Go ahead.
You do have a meeting next Wednesday, which is the 19th. There are several applications on there. Brian, can we send out maybe as soon as we possible, just the draft agenda and the link to some of the materials, and we'll get the memos out later this week, but at least we can get you an advanced look at some of these things. I know there's a Cranberry School application and a couple other items on there. So if you want to get a heads up on things, we'll get that out.
Okay.
Any public hearings?
Yeah, the Cranberry
Cranberry.
School will be public hearing.
Yeah, hopefully that should be fairly, I don't want to talk about it. Sorry. No. can't.
And then just one other quick comment. Yeah, we're going to need to learn over time the appropriate kind of questions we can ask applicants, and the kind we really shouldn't be asking, or the kind that aren't relevant. I know we've had a commissioner in the past, for example, whenever a housing development comes before us, he wants to know where the market rate units are within the building, to make sure that they're properly spread, and that they're not always given the worst placement in the construction, and that's a perfectly appropriate question. On the other hand, things like, where does the funding for this come from, or who's going to be doing the construction, while interesting questions, may not be relevant. We have a larger commission than either the Planning Commission or the Zoning Commission were. And if we don't keep focused on what's important in our meetings, the meetings are simply going to run too long. And as I said, our public hearing last week ran almost 5 hours. The fact is, by the time you get anywhere near 5 hours, your brain just isn't working as well as it should be for making the best possible decisions. So one of the other things we may do is we may not allow meetings to run that long. We may simply have to say at some point, we're ending this public hearing and we will continue it at our next meeting. Because it's not fair to the public to keep them out until 11 or 12 o'clock at night. And it certainly isn't fair to the members of the commission. So I'm going to be more aware of that beginning with our meeting next week and going forward. And please, if I seem to forget that, feel free to remind me. We've been making a point during the last couple of hearings of taking bathroom breaks. We go about an hour or two, and we take a 10-minute break. If you want to get something to eat, or just clear your mind for a few minutes, we'll give you that opportunity as well. All right, anyway, with that, JJ, did you have a question or are you moving to adjourn?
I have a comment. I was in the public room at the meeting last week that ran 4 to 5 hours. You did an amazing job of patience and virtue. So I agree with you. It was a very long meeting, but I applaud you in your moderation and conducting of it. You did an amazing job.
Thank you. And by the way, you don't need to use the raise your hand feature. As
Okay.
a member of the commission, just chime in.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
I make it.
All right, Michael makes it. Do we have a second?
I reckon.
Okay, Hector seconds. All those in favor, just raise your hands. All right, stay well. We'll see you
Stay
next.
healthy, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good
Thank
Nice
you.
to meet everyone.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.